Everyone wishes for two things: to be happy and to be free of suffering. However, our strategy to being happy and our strategy to being free of suffering differentiates when you have more resources, more opportunities. But if you really understand that doesn't matter if you have all this money or no money, everyone literally goes through the same inner battles. If it's hysterical, it's historical.
Yes,
and what that points
that
to,
one before.
Yes. And it's so powerful because oftentimes we are unconsciously addressing what's going on in the present moment as the culprit, as the assailant, as the perpetrator of our pain in the present moment. But oftentimes what we see when it's an overreaction or an underreaction, it's pointing us to something that's happened in the past. This is the paradox. This is the contradiction that I'm going to continue to speak to it, because we have to realize that relating is paradoxical. At some point, you will receive love when you give love. At some point, you're going to give love and you're going to receive criticism, or you're going to receive a backlash or selfishness back. And that's okay to a degree. You really have to realize that it's a lot more full than people make it seem. There's people in the vernacular saying that when you meet the love of your life, when you have your best friends, you never argue, you never fight. It's like, these are lies.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to announce the upcoming launch of my new book titled The Nomadic Soul, a seeker's guide to finding a sense of self and belonging in the modern world, which highlights a profound yet often unexplored part of your identity that holds the key to everything from answering your biggest questions to finding deeper meaning and joy in everyday life. Visit thenomadicsoulbook.com to learn more, download a free chapter, or to buy a copy. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dreamcatcher Podcast, a place where your dreams can find a voice. I'm your host, Celine Chenoy. Thank you to all of you who return every week to tune in to become a better version of yourself. Make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't already, and rate our show if you enjoyed this episode. We live in an increasingly self-focused society, which only exacerbates the loneliness that plagues modern society. According to my guest, Sah D'Simone, we are not meant to be alone. It is side by side with others where true wisdom flourishes. He's here to tell us why connection is a fundamental piece of a deep spiritual practice and how to connect with others authentically. Sah D'Simone is a spiritual revolutionary, mystic, artist, award-winning filmmaker, and best-selling author. He is well known for hosting the top-rated Spiritually Sassy Show podcast and creating the Somatic Activated Healing method. His trauma-informed approach is informed by his grassroots work in orphanages, homeless shelters, and rehab centers in Indonesia, Nepal, India, and the US. Sah uses his method to support Cedars Sinai Hospital as a member of their Spiritual Care Chaplain intern team. In this interview, Sah draws on his insights and tools to introduce a new way to transform the way we relate to others by releasing an us versus them mindset, cultivating radical compassion, and creatively transforming our struggles into opportunities for awakening. In this way, we can deepen our friendship, build community, and heal the world. Hi, Sah. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm very happy to have you on the show. And I want to start out by saying that I really enjoyed reading your book titled Spiritually We, because it felt very timely for me. I'm at a point in my life where I'm really trying to focus on my relationships, my friendships, my intimate connections. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I feel like in the past decade, I was all focused on work and kind of building my platform. And now I kind of felt that it's important to invest my time and my energy towards really nurturing these healthy and meaningful connections. So it really spoke to me, and I'm sure that it will speak to a lot of people because we are currently living in this loneliness epidemic, and it's like really pervading our society. What are your thoughts on that? Because you did mention that in your book.
Well, that's the premise of the book, and I also want to say I want to applaud your courage for naming the fact that you've built such a beautiful, robust platform, and now you're like, hey, there's more to life. This isn't the only thing that I should focus on. I think a lot of us attribute happiness towards having stuff to show for. And when you really study the longest living people, when you study wellness and well-being, it's all relational. It's all to do with the people that we are the closest with, or the fact that we even have people close to us. The invitation for the reader is to remind us that two things. One, we are going to go through inevitably hard things in life, like aging, sickness, and death of our own death and the death of loved ones. And we should not, capital S, go through these inevitably hard things alone. And so many people, and I'm strictly speaking for statistics in the United States, are going through these really hard experiences alone. So this is one side. And on the other side, if you're looking to become what we call spiritually liberated, enlightened, free from a Buddhist perspective, right? This samadhi, nirvana, Buddhahood, whatever word you have, you do need people. Buddha's enlightenment was relational. When he became free, even the night before, but the morning of his enlightenment, when the demon, the weak, in Buddhism, the personification of all that's evil and bad and wrong, it's called Mara. For the Judeo-Christian, it may be the devil or Satan or Lucifer, whatever language you have. That creature or that entity visit the Buddha and said, how do you know that you're free? And the Buddha said, Mother Nature is my witness, by placing his hand on the ground, and the earth shook in affirmation. These aren't just like a simple little background noise for us to think of on the spiritual path. This isn't just a little comma in this myth of the Buddha's life. This is huge. It's to show that it is relational, that it requires, we need to test how liberated we are in relationship. Now, I want to trace back to your point, the first part of the reason why I wrote the book, right? So there's these two sides for your spiritual liberation and for the fact that we're going to go through these inevitable hard things. As a medical chaplain in training at one of the best hospitals in America, which that qualifies as one of the best hospitals in the world, what I have noticed, Celine, and this is the most heartbreaking thing, as someone who sits with the sick and dying, in all backgrounds, all faiths, it's non-denominational, right? What I've noticed, and this is the most heartbreaking thing ever, is that people are going through some people are going through oncology journeys. They're very complex. Some people are going through minor surgeries. Some people are actually entering the last few days or last few weeks of their life. And what I've noticed and what I've seen and talked to the medical team is that 60 to 70% of the elderly population that enters a hospital and goes through their hospitalization to wherever direction he may take alone, without social support. So they have no contact with friends or contact with family. That is a symptom of a very sick society. We should not have a room full of flowers in a hospital and text messages on our phone without bodies there. I cannot be the only body there holding the patient's hand. I cannot be the only body there consoling and being with the daughter her mother is just dying. I can't be the only person there. And oftentimes us as medical chaplains are the only ones there. So this is the most alarming thing, is these two sides. Take it wherever you want to go. The importance of not going through the hard things alone, or spiritual enlightenment. And the proposition, the idea of the book is that you realize that by by deepening your connections, you're doing both. You're becoming spiritually liberated, and you're also not going through the inevitable hard things alone. Celine, a year and a half ago, from where we're recording the show, my mother died, and I could have not gotten through the
Sorry to hear
grief if
that.
it wasn't for. Thank you for naming and raising the grief into the conversation. It's insane what you go through, and our society is so grief phobic. It's so death phobic. We're so driven to vitality and wellness and youth, and we're avoiding the inevitability of aging, sickness, and death.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And it's really heartbreaking to know that so many people in these hospitals are, suffering from all kinds of ailments and they're even dying alone. Did you get any insight into why they were alone at that point in their
Well,
life?
it's because of they had a chance, they had an opportunity like you, perhaps, to say, "Oh my God, I've focused on work maybe a little bit too much for a decade." I'm forgive me if I'm overstepping here, but I'm using you as an example, right? Because
No
people are going to
problem.
look to you as a successful entrepreneur, someone that they can aspire to be. And you named at the beginning of the show, I've spent a decade building my platform, and now I'm realizing that I need to focus on friends and intimate connections. This is the exact point, Celine. It's that a lot of people either have that moment of awakefulness, they're like, oh my God, I need to focus on friendship, or they actually are so entrenched and so immersed in their work because that's the only way that they can, keep life at float. But a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people don't stop to realize, hey, capitalistic economy will always ask for more. There's never a point, there's never an end. The capitalistic economy will always say more is more, and because more is more, and your self-worth is tied to productivity and what you have to show for. So you're never going to feel enough. And if you can't ever feel enough, you can never rest. And if you can never rest, then you can't really look around you and be like, whoa, I went too far in this direction, too far in that direction. I need to actually prioritize friendship and connection and intimacy. And then there's a deeper layer to it as well. And now it's more towards the vernacular of today's culture. We have so much language around, I don't feel safe around this person, abuse, trauma, toxic, all this
Narcissists.
psycho-spiritual, narcissist, yeah, all this
Yeah.
psycho-spiritual languaging, which is helpful. And what's actually doing at a really deep, subtle place, it's creating a very fragile society where we don't stay in friendships long enough for them to bloom. We don't have hard conversations. We don't address, we cut off. And this is another symptom of a culture of Amazon Prime, of everything's fast and replaceable, and we're not fixing things. We're not being with things until things get resolved or healed or
Yeah.
transformed. We're immediately,
Relationships take
everything's
work.
replaceable.
Yeah,
That's right.
relationships take work. You got to rough it out sometimes, to really take the time to understand the other person and understand how they're triggering you and how to manage your triggers. I know you talk about that in one of the chapters about how the triggers that we experience when we're with another person is really not about them. It's about us, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a hard pill to swallow. But if we really realize that the person that you are relating to, they can't put the anger inside of you. They can't put the despair, the terror, the confusion, the agony, plug in your unpleasant feeling. They can't place that inside of you. All that we're doing in relationship is watering each other's seeds, things that are already existing in our inner garden. Some of these things are our own anger, our own despair, our own confusion. And some of these things are our joy, our inspiration, our creativity. So in relationship, a lot of the times it's the languaging in the vernacular is, you make me feel this way, you drive me this way, you make me feel X, Y, and Z, and because I feel this, then I do this. And we place the blame in the other person, rarely taking the time to pause and realize, like, oh wow, these feelings have been inside of me. And then I want to take a step further. And this is a mantra in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's if it's hysterical, it's historical. And what
Yes,
that
I've heard
points
that one
to,
before.
yeah.
Yes.
And it's so powerful because oftentimes we are unconsciously addressing what's going on in the present moment as the culprit, as the assailant, as the perpetrator of our pain in the present moment. But oftentimes what we see when it's an overreaction or an underreaction, it's pointing us to something that's happened in the past. And if you hold a esoteric view or a wider view from like a Vedic perspective, an Eastern philosophy perspective, even a scientific perspective at this point, you can see that a lot of the ways that we are feeling, that we have been habituated and conditioned right now, has to do with things that didn't start with us. A lot of the unfelt feelings didn't just start with you. A lot of the outbursts of anger, it's something that mom and grandmother and grandma's mother, all of
Yeah,
them have been
generational.
carrying. Exactly. So this generational trauma is alive in all of us. And unfortunately, it spills out and it bubbles up in the person that we are arguing in the present moment. And then we blame them for that generational trauma, for that generational anger that's massive. So it's out of context. A lot of our fights in relationship are out of context.
So what do we do in that moment, Sub, when we feel like we're going to go down a rabbit hole, when we feel like, uh-oh, I'm feeling something here, and I'm
Mhm,
about to say something that I would regret later. What do we do in
mhm,
that moment? Because I think that's what people find most challenging when they're really trying
mhm,
to get a hold of themselves, but
mhm,
they feel
mhm,
on some
mhm.
level that something is off. What do they do?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I'm training practice that has to be done outside of when the wheels are already falling off, outside of when you are about to say or do or throw the thing or bang the door or whatever it may be. Plug in your toxic behavior. What I'm going to share with you is what you do when you're washing dishes, when you're walking your dog, when you are cleaning your house, when you're hanging out, whatever, minus the argument, the fight time. What we need to do is feel our feelings without stories. This is the basis of mindfulness, which is also the basis of somatics. Can I learn to feel what I feel when I feel without a story? And this may sound totally foreign for a lot of people, but the background of the book, I keep bringing people back to that. We are giving extra meaning to every single feeling, and that's driving us crazy. Feelings have a life cycle of 90 seconds to maybe 3 minutes most. And then maybe some neurochemistry stays in the body for maybe 12 hours or 24 hours or a little longer. But the initial burst that drives our thinking, that drives our words, that drives our actions, we need to be able to learn to feel that when it's happening. And a lot of us don't know how to feel what we feel when we feel. We know how to think it. We know how to blame somebody else for what's going on in here. So the way to do it, Celine, and this is where it requires practice, is where in your body do you feel what you feel? And for people who are just starting, when you're washing dishes, when you're walking your dog, when you're doing whatever it is that you're doing, simple, mundane things in life, can you travel your awareness to the place in the body where you feel a burst of tension? And can you just be with tension for what it is? We don't need to go into, oh, this is a feeling of rejection because of this, and that. Oh, this is a feeling of anger because this and this and this and that. No. Can you just be with that feeling for what it is, as a passing sensation that has an expiration date? Slowly, slowly, something beautiful will happen. You are going to notice that they pass, they change. It releases, the hook gets unhooked. Our thinking becomes more clear. Now, you do this long enough in your own life, in your simple ways, when you're doing the simple things in life, and now you're able to bring that kind of spaciousness and that kind of pause and awareness to the argument, to the fight. That's when the game changes. You're actually able to know, oh, wow, I have this burst of tension in my belly. It feels like anger. And you know that when you have anger visiting your body, your mind goes to all these worst case scenarios. And you either want to run or you want to fight or you want to shut down. Instead of you following up with any of these conditioned, habituated ways of dealing with the feeling in the body, just be with it. Anything that's witnessed through the light of awareness changes. The light of awareness has a quality of warmth. Anything in a face of warmth changes. We have to realize that the same way that a pile of compost becomes the greatest fertilizer that we have through warmth, same thing. We have to learn how to let go of our feelings. One of my students says, my work is like training people how to take out the trash without having to go through it. So I want people to understand that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. Thank you for explaining that. Doesn't it also help if we choose the type of people who don't trigger us as much? The people who bring that out of us, the side of us that is not very pretty. I mean, we should try to avoid them as much as possible, right?
You have such good questions. I love this so much. Thank you. No and yes, two sides, right? And a big part of my work is training people in paradox. So yes,
you do
and
mention that. I love
yeah.
I love this concept, the mindset of paradox, which is the willingness to see that people are contradictory. I mean, how true is that? It was like an aha moment for me. So yeah,
Yeah.
tell us about that.
So that statement that you just said is the background and the backbone of how do we have annoying people in our lives and how do we sort of protect ourselves from it? So two sides, right? If we are only hanging out with people who are where they love us back when we love them, or they're kind to us because we're kind to them. There's just this like reciprocity of pleasantness and sweetness and kindness happening. That can only get you so far on the spiritual path. This is why I say there's two sides to the book. One, we are becoming better friends, better people, so we can have connections that can carry us through the inevitable aging, sickness, and death. Now, from the other side of that, are we looking to become spiritually liberated, free? And if we are, then avoiding people who trigger us is like avoiding a huge part of the spiritual path, because triggering people are showing us where we have unprocessed, unfelt, unhealed stories, feelings, narratives. So if we're avoiding people because we are protecting our peace, think about how much that's in the vernacular of today's world. It's about, I need to protect myself. I can't be around these people because they trigger me. They're toxic. They're bad. All of that is about well-being and wellness. Now, the book is about spirituality, which is an entirely different. One thing kind of leads to the next, but it's an entire different stage that you're playing at. You're not afraid of difficulty. You welcome it. You're not afraid of hardship. You welcome it because you realize that just like the day goes into night, just like the summer leads into fall and then winter, we are not afraid of darkness. We're not afraid of difficulty because we know that it is part of the human gig. One of the common denominators across every major mystical tradition is the realization that pain is part of the curriculum. No mystical tradition across planet Earth says that pain is something that you can avoid and become happy. The common denominator across every mystical tradition is that in order for us to achieve a sense of contentment, of peace, of happiness, it's our capacity to become friends with pain, not in a masochistic way, not in a nihilistic way, but in a way that it's inevitable. It's part of life. If we're avoiding this inevitable part of our lives, we're seeking to only live in the daylight, only in the sunshine. And I guess it's why I live in California, because of the weather, for that reason. But it's avoiding. It's, if you really don't realize that there's beautiful flowers that fragrant the air at nighttime only, that certain vegetables only grow at night, that certain things only happen at nighttime. And I want to use this metaphor, this mythopoetic approach for us to realize that avoiding discomfort and avoiding the triggering stepmother or cousin or best friend or whoever it is, boss, whatever, you are avoiding learning about yourself. You're avoiding deepening your authenticity and learning truly about who you are at the core of your being. Does that make sense? And then there's this other little side that I just want to name. If you
Yeah.
have been historically abused and hurt, and you have experienced capital T trauma, perhaps in relationship, then yes, you got to take time away from these people, but you got to test your material. At some point, you have to revisit, not as a deep connection, but just like, hey, am I still hung up? Because if you are, it's creating balance in the body and in the mind and closeness in the heart.
I just want to clarify something. You're not saying that we should put up with bad behavior, right?
It's not put up.
Yeah.
It's this is the fine line, that I'm trying to explain. There's a fine line. How much are you avoiding at all costs triggering experiences? Because some people build their entire lives around distracting themselves from feeling unpleasant feelings. Look at our world today. Netflix, binge watching, Netflix and
Yeah.
chill.
They're just numbing themselves.
Exactly. The culture of numbing is the exact point to a culture that is driven to avoid feeling trigger at all costs. So if you realize that that's in the vernacular, that this is the background of our society, that we go from our phones to the computer, to the TV, to the food, to the whatever it is, we're just plug in. We are equating distraction as happiness. How quickly can I distract myself from feeling unpleasant feelings with happiness? That's not happiness. That's a life of avoidance. So when we have that in the vernacular, when we have that as the context of how so many people live their lives, then when you ask me, is it about, I forget the exact words, but is it about putting up? To a degree, yes, because you got to train.
I was just thinking that to get in the arena of life, I think you would need to be quite strong, because you meet all kinds of people. And if you meet someone who is like, for instance, if you're at work and you meet people who are competitive and who are trying to like outwork you or try to undermine your success, you got to have that strength to know how to deal with them and not take that personally. And that takes inner work.
Exactly. That's exactly it. All of that is it's yes. And Sally, who works next to you, perhaps, right, in the cubicle next to you at work, she may be really annoying and aggressive sometimes and kind of bossy, and she's not your boss, but she treats you in that way. And she may also, as you get to know her, she may actually be the one who bakes cookies every week and brings to the local homeless shelter. She may actually be the person that has always a new foster dog at her house, because she's working with the foster system in your town. She may actually be the one who will shows up for people when they need emotional support at work. It's the contradiction piece. It's the paradoxical piece.
Yeah.
It's like everyone has parts of themselves that are annoying and selfish, and they're also good and sweet things, about everybody.
So it's about having that curiosity and that patience to really try to get to know that person and see all sides of them and appreciate them as a whole person.
You named it. You literally named it. This is literally, but doing that takes massive inner work. It takes you to be able to literally feel your own feelings. They're happening in your body as a responsibility that is yours to do. Learning how to deal with your own inner world in such a deep way that you're not blaming external circumstances for how you feel every time. Because if you are, then it's always going to be somebody else's fault and always going to be somebody else's responsibility to make you feel better. So therefore, you're never going to want to be around people who may trigger you. You're never going to want to enter a space where there is challenging people and experiences. And this is just not how life works. We want to live a full life that has all of it,
What do you feel about, like, a lot of people these days are trying to, they have this mindset of, what can this person do for me? Like, what can I get out of them? That sort of transactional mentality. And that can get in the way of really finding those genuine friendships. And you actually use a beautiful metaphor to describe them. You call call them spiritual gardeners. So what can we do to be conscious of this mentality of what can this person do for me? Like, what can I get out of this person? And really think about how can I serve this person?
Mm-hmm.
How do we shift that
Mm-hmm.
mentality?
I mean, that's such a big, delicious, beautiful question that I invite people to get the book and dive into it, because
Yeah.
it takes multiple steps to arrive at this place of this level of clarity, you know? But in short, we have to realize this. Are you the person that people call when they need a shoulder to cry on? Or do you have people that you can call when you need support? Do you have friends that would perhaps pay your rent if you couldn't pay rent this month? Do you have friends who are going to drive you to your oncology appointment? Do you have friends who are checking in on you when you haven't, made a sound on social media or nothing for a week? They're like, "Hey, where are you? I haven't seen you." Like, do you have these people? These are very simple questions that should orient the kind of person that you are in the world. Because if you are only seeking to one up or to have a transactional, what can you do for me, this capitalistic economy approach to people, you're really going to realize through the questions I'm prompting you that perhaps you don't have people who check in on you. Perhaps you don't have people who are not checking in on you to say, "Hey, let's go out and get drunk and high." No, I'm saying genuine, like, "Hey, what's going on, Celine? How have you been? I haven't heard from you in a couple of weeks." And then you can actually feel relaxed enough and to have an honest conversation with them. This is the barometer there. It's, do I have people that will care for me when I have very little, close to nothing? And then am I there for other people in the same way? Have people felt relaxed and calm to be able to let me know what's going on for them, in this deep, meaningful way? So we have to have that barometer, that level of wakefulness to see, like, oh, wow, all of my friendships are only about work. And I called a friend out on this the other day. I said, "You and I have been trying to build this friendship for a few years. And whenever you are going through a hard time, I show up for you. I ask, how are you? I call you out of the blue, although, this person lives in another country. I call you out of the blue. I ask how you're doing. And your point of contact with me is always, "Hey, what about this work thing that we're doing? What can we do about that work thing?" And I'm like, "No." Yesterday, I said, I addressed the elephant in the room. I said, "I have taken space away for the last month because I feel like our conversations are always about work. And I'm a multifaceted human being that is more than my work, although my work is pretty much my life. It's meshed together. But there is a time and place to talk about a business plan or a creative idea." So we have to have these conversations, if we want to deepen the connections with people.
And do you think everyone is capable of being a sacred friend?
I 100%
Do
think
they
so.
have the
Otherwise,
emotional capacity to be there for us? Because sometimes in the past, personally, I have been disappointed by some people, not everyone. I see envy creeping in. I see competitiveness creeping in, especially among women. And that has made me a little bit jaded. Is there any way to, I guess, I think assess is a wrong word, but to figure out if this person will really be that sacred friend who we feel that there will be some reciprocity. Of course, we are coming from a place of care. We're going to give our all to them. But how can we be sure that this person is really going to be there for us and have our best interests at heart?
such a good question, my dear. And unfortunately, there's no way to be sure, because we have marriages of 4 decades that end when they're 80 years old. And you're like, how are you ending your marriage and you're 80? You have less than a decade to live. What are you doing? And we see that. Right? Things like this happen all the time. It's not an insulated event. So I can't say that it's for sure we're going to have these people. And what we do need to do is start to realize, you said reciprocity, and I named reciprocity a little earlier. as a way for us to see if our friendships are only with people who have this reciprocity of sweetness and kindness and generosity. Because if it is, then we're not developing ourselves spiritually. Now, in regards to can I make friends that will for sure be there for me? I said no. And I also want to name one more thing to it here. Our idea of reciprocity is actually ending friendships too soon, because we believe that if I give, I should receive. And if I give this much, I should receive this much. Now, if you see friendships that you have, you and I have, most people probably have, I hope they do, or marriages that last multiple decades, or friendships that have been around for multiple decades, you realize that there's different levels of give and take and receive at different seasons of life. Some seasons you have nothing to offer. When my mother died, I was debilitated and lost and confused, and I didn't have the joy and the sparkle and the play that I always bring to every place I'm in. I was the one that was on the couch quiet. I was the one that people had to come over and cook for me. I wasn't the one that was bringing the sweets and the cooking and the party and the enthusiasm to the space. I was the one that needed that support, and it lasts for multiple months. So it's a give and take. It's the kind of the reciprocity view has to be pulled away when you're really wanting to deepen the friendship, and you also have to have it there to a certain degree. So this is the paradox. This is the contradiction that I'm going to continue to speak to it, because we have to realize that relating is paradoxical. At some point, you will receive love when you give love. At some point, you're going to give love and you're going to receive criticism, or you're going to receive a backlash or selfishness back, and that's okay to a degree. You really have to realize that it is way more, it's a lot more full than people make it seem. There's people in the vernacular saying that when you meet the love of your life, when you have your best friends, you never argue, you never fight. It's like, these are lies. Whoever is saying that, run away, and I'm not saying I have unlocked a key and I am an expert. I mean, I do qualify as someone that can speak to it, because my work within the psychosomatic spiritual space, I've only haven't been in two areas: refugee camps and prisons. Every other area, from orphan centers to former slaves to, I mean, you name it, I've been there, and I've brought support, and also to global celebrities. So I've seen it all. And what comes down to it, global celebrities and people who have nothing. It's really about the people who are there for you, who aren't really like wanting to benefit from you. When I was around these global celebrities, the people that were traveling with them and being around them, it was their cousin, was their friend from high school. It wasn't another famous person next to them. I think we are looking and learning about how celebrity culture handles life, and where it's misinterpreted. It's a marketing scheme, but what happens behind closed doors is different. It will take work, Celine, to arrive at a place where we are able to relinquish reciprocity entirely, and then be okay with different seasons of life being sweet and other unpleasant. And then the most important thing of all that I want to say about all this is, can your spiritual practice help you to have hard conversations? If you have learned to have hard conversations, then your spiritual path is working. Then you've graduated from the sort of a me, mine, and I wellness world, and you've entered the spiritual path where you can have hard conversations for the sake of benefiting all. You're not only wanting to fulfill your perspective and you walk away from being right, or you're not only wanting that person to be the one that holds the highest truth. You're wanting to create a connection with what I call the third truth, this higher wisdom, a wisdom, an information, a download, an intuitive hit that's beneficial for all people. And we have tapped into that, I think, all of us. But in order for us to get to that, we have to be comfortable having hard conversations. So if you want a deepen connection with people, You have to learn how to say the things and name it and not be afraid of, oh, they're going to reject me. They're going to leave me. I'm going to be alone. And look around. So many people don't do the thing because they're afraid of an outcome that hasn't even happened.
Since you have this really broad perspective, having been in places like orphanages and also mingling with celebrities, did you see any differences in the way they handle their relationships in all these different environments? I'm just curious.
Look, one thing I can tell you is this.
Or commonalities.
How much money, yeah, it doesn't matter how much money you have. Everyone wishes for two things: to be happy and to be free of suffering. However, our strategy to being happy and our strategy to being free of suffering differentiates when you have more resources, more opportunities. But if you really understand that doesn't matter if you have all this money or no money, everyone literally goes through the same inner battles, wanting to belong, wanting to have friends, not wanting to be lonely, wanting to connect, and struggling with it because the vernacular says we can do it alone. You have to do it alone. Look at the cover of Forbes magazine, self-made billionaire. There's not a single thing in this reality that is self-made. Not a single thing in this earth exists independently from its own side. We are interconnected, interdependent. Our entire way of thinking, relating, feeling is relational. There's not a single atom or molecule thing happening in our bodies and around us that is happening independently from its own side, outside of everything else happening collectively. And when we clock into that, we realize, oh, wow. So the same way that I suffer, they suffer. So just like me, I suffer. Just like me, they suffer. Just like me, they want to be happy. Approaching from that perspective it helps to equalize the playing field, so you can be around anybody and have this heart of compassion, because you realize that perhaps they're driving this most expensive car, perhaps they have this enormous fame, and all of that's very shiny to the eyes, and it can be very disorienting because all we're seeing is this external shell. But we need to realize through the heart of compassion, through a humanizing heart, that just like you, they also suffer. And just like you, they also want to be happy. And that is a really relaxing feeling, because I went through a period of my life that I was like, wow, am I the only one that thinks human life is painful? This is why I became a Buddhist, because my teacher said, I was in the north of the Himalayas 10 years ago, and she says, being human is painful. I said, excuse me? Please say that again, because that was the most beautiful thing I've heard. Because before that, I was like, am I the only one that thinks this whole thing's confusing? Am I the only one that thinks this whole thing is super painful? People weren't naming that. So I felt alone. I felt isolated, and that's what led me to drugs and alcohol and suicidal ideation and all the things, all the hardships that I've gone through. It was because of this view that wasn't in my vernacular then. It wasn't available and spoken to with such truth. Like, hey, everyone is fighting a war. Doesn't matter how shiny their outer layer looks. Underneath the surface, in the anonymous of their bedroom, there is chaos happening unless they've become fully enlightened, and then they're dealing with it in a different way. But most of us are not there yet.
Yeah. It's totally inevitable that if they're human, they are going through something in their life. And I think that will really prevent us from getting into that state of being judgmental or trying to pinpoint where they're going wrong and how they're handling their life. So I think what you're saying is so, so true. Yeah.
Thank you.
Very profound. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
So, I could talk to you all day, but I think we better end our conversation here. Thank you so much for being on our show and sharing all your knowledge and wisdom. I learned a lot, and I'm sure that our listeners did too. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. I just want to name one thing, just for the sake of people listening and feeling like, what's the first step? Next time you feel lonely, don't reach out for technology. Don't reach out to anything that's going to distract you from feeling that feeling. Feel that feeling for its entirety. And then reach out, call or text someone and say the words that our society has deemed as bad, which is, I need a friend, I need connection. Let go of this view that the word I need is disgusting or bad or weak. Realize as a strength. So next time you feel lonely, don't watch TV, don't eat, don't go on social media, don't even go on a walk alone. Call someone, name that feeling. And then if no one is available, then please do go do whatever way that helps you relax. But first, my wish, my prayer for everyone listening is to don't distract yourself from when loneliness comes to visit. We need each other. Connection is the cure. We can't do it alone.
Oh, wow. I am sure that has touched someone out there, and that can actually be life-changing for some people. So thank you for saying that. Really.
Mhm. My pleasure. Thank you so much. You had such amazing questions. It was a joy. Thank you for having me. I'm
You're
honored.
most you're most welcome. And I want to let our listeners know that if you're interested in learning more about Sah's book or purchasing a copy, uh, and the title of the book is Spiritually We, The Art of Relating and Connecting from the Heart. You can find it wherever books are sold and on Sah's website, sahdsimone.com. The links will be in the description. And I highly recommend getting a copy because it's filled with so many gems of wisdom. And you will really, really gain a lot from it.